Welcome to Wednesday. Welcome to Winning Your Day. Got two announcements. I got a quote that we're going to show it and talk about it, and I have another quote that after I saw it, it made me really reflect. I love things that make me reflect. It's going into the aspects of verses with your internal work. You know, that's what we work on. We work on shadow. We work on our shadow work. If you are too big to do the small things, then you are too small for the big things. If you are too big to do the small things, then you are too small for the big things. It made me think about, are you really surprised at this point? We come to a point in our shadow work. We come to a point in our internal work. We're working on ourselves. We're understanding more and more. We should be coming to the understanding more and more that our energy and how we manage our energy, the small thing that we think is so small, our internal work, that sets the tone for how we manage everything else. Remember, your emotions, your emotional literacy, you understanding yourself in that narrative, that's the focal point. That's your focal point. Your energy. How you care, like self-care, the depth to your self-care. Not just, I went to go got my hair done and I'm gonna do this. It's like, what are you doing to gain traction in your actions? Are you really surprised? When it comes into us taking this assessing with our internal work, doing our assessments, when you're really doing your assessments, when you're really learning the lesson, when you're really applying, one thing that I had to realize was I wasn't surprised about anything anymore. Not in this sense. I wasn't surprised on things because I learned my reaction in looking at why did it bother me? One of our tones, especially when we're getting into our internal work, is not what is said, not what is done, not what we hear, not to that extent, not what we see, but why does it bother me? Why does it bother me? And then, as yesterday when we got into, it's not about the identity. It's not the identity that you keep gripping to. It's why does it bother me? I remember things used to bother me earlier on. Like I was so hard-headed, still hard-headed sometimes, but it's like from a different perspective of now it's like that boundary's been set. But I remember for myself when I would get irritated, when I would have this expectancy, because I went into a position, I was in a space, I was doing things that had a certain narrative, my work ethic, how I held the standards that I set for myself, why I set these standards. The standards that I set for myself, why I set these standards, all of these things in this aspect, it always could think about, you set the tone, is like, I do it, so I expect everybody else to do it. I do this, so I expect you to do this. You don't know. You're just using your perception. Remember, you can't change others' perceptions. You can't change others' perspectives. You only can learn how to assess their perception and their perspective to understand if they're projecting, and then understanding where they're projecting from based on the emotional catalyst. Remember, all of your emotions, they all mean some shit. It's not just, you're angry. It's not just, you're sad. It's not, just you're upset or you're excited. It means something. We have to understand this is emotional intelligence. So many of us go through our spaces, we lack emotional intelligence. So not only do we lack emotional intelligence in dealing with situations, but since we lack emotional intelligence in assessing situations, then why do you think the reaction is always what you look for? This is one of the things when we start doing our shadow work and we're doing our internal work and we're now looking at our reactions. Now we're looking at our reactions. We're looking at how we react. We're listening to ourselves more, having those conversations more, talking to our inner child, giving our inner child the space to flourish, the things, we're giving our inner child the things based on not the external, but truly to them. This is when we get into this is when we're talking about that self-care routine and why it's so important. I made the post earlier after I left the gym. I was like, wake up. I said, wake up. 4:30 a.m. full body scan. Wake up. 5:15. From 5 to 5:15, 15 minutes of meditation. Wake up. Gym alchemy. Wake up. Moment of sun gazing. Wake up. Moment of reflection. It doesn't matter, and it's all in parentheses. And I said, it doesn't matter what you put in those parentheses. That's just my routine. That's just the aspects for me to help me move forward and get myself going. Breath work to the aspect. I didn't understand how powerful breath work was until one time I got literally an hour of sleep. I got literally an hour of sleep. And I was like, I'm tired as shit. And I gotta go to work. I gotta go deal with this. I gotta go deal with these motherfuckers. I think it was one of the times when the big heads was coming into the restaurant. But I was sitting there myself, I was like, let me try this breath. Something that's triggered me to do this breath work. Something that's triggered me to do my breath work. So I took in them 6 deep breaths. Deep down into the stomach. Just took them 6 deep breaths, released them, and then I did 6 more deep breaths, but I held that joint for 4 seconds. I took it into a 10 count, blew it out, held it for 4 seconds, blew it out to a 12 count, and I just kept cycling that. And then I noticed, at first I was lightheaded as hell. I was like, I feel so goddamn high. But then I noticed my energy changed. Remember that deep belly breath, that's like, this is your tapping with your inner child, because that deep belly breath that you take in, if you have kids, you've seen babies, look at how a baby sleep. Their whole abdomen comes out as they're breathing. Quick breaths, quick breaths, quick breaths, quick breaths, quick breaths. When it comes to us in our time right now, based on, and that just came through on that, when it comes to healing our inner child, and just something as simple as assessing how you breathe. Assessing how you breathe. Are your breaths deep? Are your breaths shallow? What is your breathing pattern? That's something that can understand in your body with that full body scan when you wake up. Monitoring how you breathe. Some of us, just like our life, because remember, you breathe life into everything. You have the thought, you breathe life, even if you don't say the thought out loud, you breathe life into it. So sometimes when we're looking at our space or our environment, and we're always quick moving, we're always quick to keep trying to get somewhere, do something, always got to keep on the move, not really taking that time for ourselves. Think about your breath. You running everywhere, you running like you out of breath. So think about your breath. So think about the change, the slight variable change in your life. If you wake up and you do that full body scan, you don't pick up anything. You just lay there, take that full body scan, and you sit there with yourself, and then you say, okay, cool, let me take a couple deep breaths real quick. I can guarantee your energy, I can tell you your frequency of your energy is going to change because you took that moment to yourself. It's all in how you invest in that routine. Are you really surprised that the moment that you start investing into yourself, things start to change? Are you really surprised that when you've learned something in that aspect, and this will be going to my next beautiful line. One of the biggest lines that we use, and I'm tackling with people I'm tackling with my clients and people that come to me for a consultation. One of the deepest lines that I have to tackle with them is they'll always say blood's thicker than water. They always say just that part, blood is thicker than water. They always say families, they're stuck on that narrative. But what about trying to raise their consciousness and raise their level or raise their spiritual awareness and their emotional literacy? And I always say this, and it made me think because I went and Googled the whole damn quote. Blood is thicker than the water of the womb. That's the full phrase. That is the full quote. Blood is thicker than the water of the womb. That means the things that you were born into, and it talks about that automatically sparked me with the soul contract, karmic debt, soul contract, and shadow work, internal work. Blood is thicker than the water of the womb. That means that means the water of the womb, the family aspect, the narrative of what you were born in, the soul contract. That soul contract, what you were born into, the lessons that you're learning from that, through the traumatic experiences, through the shadow self. The blood bond, the connection based on you making that blood sacrifice in this aspect. Because you're making that sacrifice. You're making a sacrifice to alleviate your soul. It's a blood sacrifice. Can't you stop being scared? It's a blood sacrifice. Those bonds that you make in the bonds of blood, and we think about somebody, you watch a movie when they cut themselves in the hand, they say, we are now tied together by blood. We are not tied together by blood. It makes you think about the aspects of, are you really surprised that in your space, until you do this internal work, everything replicates itself, coming from the inner aspect. We always think we reach for the external and ignore the internal, not realizing that the reason that external narrative is there, that external point to reach to is there, is because of something going on inside. That's why we reach to it. That's why we gravitate towards it. So the moment that you acknowledge it, or it's acknowledged, since it's a projection from your internal, it gets distorted. It makes you think about all those arguments that you had. It makes you think about every conversation that you're having. It makes you think about every space that now that you're learning to manage your energy. It's different because we always think managing our energy is on that surface level because we trying to keep the environment together. All of that's going to change. I talked about it before. I'm going to talk about it on Friday. You are the initiator of the butterfly of the Mandela effect. So many aspects. Once I understood what it was, doing that internal work, having that conversation with my inner child, doing those meditations, really talking to my inner child, having that one-on-one, the way that I reacted was different. I stopped reacting. I came into a sense of responding. I came into the sense of really assessing. Not saying that I still didn't get angry, because that would be a lie. Not saying that I still didn't get mad, irritated, and all these certain narratives, because that was the residue I had to deal with, the residue that I was pulling off my heart. So I got into the path of the heart, but it was part of the process. I was finally accepting. I was finally acknowledging. I was finally putting myself into a space to where I was not submitting to my urges, submitting to the urge. And it's a process. It's a whole process. So are you really surprised? If we understand that everything outside of us is a projection of our shadow in our life, things that we are dealing with or have not dealt with, the unseen creates your space, then are you really surprised when it happens? Or is it more that you're reacting to it through the emotional channel that connected to it, the corresponding emotional channel? You're always pulling your emotions. You're always pulling your emotions from somewhere. Your emotions come from that anger, that doubt, that insecurity, that jealousy, that feeling, that longing, that needing. It's always pulling from a wound that has to be assessed. Ain't nothing outside of you, can nothing connect to you, can nothing control you, can nothing put you in any position unless the roots are within self. That's the only way things can keep being produced in your space, is if you have the roots of it, a root in that aspect corresponded with inside of self. So are you really surprised? The constant state of reaction, instead of learning how to respond. that reacts into the same day every single moment. Instead of really looking at yourself and really asking yourself the real questions. As I began, we're going to close it off with that. If you're too big for the small things, to take care or do the small things, the things that you keep putting off in that state of, that's the small things. Remember, the small things make the big things. If I'm too big to do the small shit, then I'm too small for the big shit. If I'm too big, that means my ego, my wound, that unseen aspect, the thing I'm not dealing with, I feel that it's too big. That means I got to break that shit down and really start assessing it. Because until I do that, I will always feel too small for the big things that are coming into my space. That deserving, that rising into my true self, that authenticity that I so much want, that peace that I want to become, that love that I want to become, that frequency that I want to become. That's all in your growth. This week on the God Hour podcast, we got into that neutrality. Links are all in my description, all into my page. There's actually one under this video if you go straight to my page. And everything from readings, setting up that consultation, Natal Chart analysis. If you just want to have a nice, you got some questions that you want to ask. You don't want to go any too deep. Go ahead and book that. Go ahead and hit me in the inbox and book up that book. That's what I'm here for. I want you to be the best. I want you to be fucking great. I want you to embrace the day. I want you to embrace the day from a place of learning, not from a place of reaction. I love you. We love us. Ashe.